Welcome everyone. How's
Day
everybody doing?
two.
Yeah, we got day two. We don't have Megan today, so it's just us hanging out. How's everybody doing?
Not even in the Discord. I gotta turn that on.
Jesse, I see you're here. How are you? Got a couple people excited for day two. It's always good to see.
37 updates. Oh, Discord.
Yeah, I feel like Discord has an update like every other day.
So I just launched Discord. I just opened it. And already in the little top right, is that the right? Yeah, that's the right top right corner. It's got that little down arrow with
Got
the
the
line
arrow? Yeah,
that says there's an update. But I
right.
literally just launched you.
Yeah.
What is going on? Why couldn't you get that last one at the same time?
Yeah. Kishin, I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Loading again. And I'm back. All right, I'm in the Discord.
There you go. Gifts only. How is your mental health? It's one of my favorite questions to ask. Got to see how everybody's doing. Jelly Beanster, how are you?
While I'm at it, I'm gonna make sure the YouTube chat works.
Oh yeah,
Looks like it's working.
it's fine. Tired. Okay.
Boom.
A little sleepy. Yeah. I'm pretty much always sleepy, unfortunately. It's just how I roll. This is how I roll.
That's your secret. You're all
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah. That's my trick. That's my life hack. Just to always be tired. Eat coffee. Coffee is a great idea. Ryan, are you a coffee drinker?
I am.
Okay. How do you like it? Cream in there? You like it?
No, usually just with like some milk.
This milk? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm lactose intolerant, so I have to do like the oat milk or almond milk or something different.
Yeah. Yeah. I like almond milk.
Although I
Almond
say
milk,
that,
like,
but I absolutely love ice cream and
yeah.
I don't care.
Hmm.
Give me the ice cream.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
suffer.
Yeah. I like a good vanilla almond milk. I haven't tried the oat milk yet.
It is a different, it is, but I don't know how to describe it, but it is different.
Yeah.
And it's still weird to me that you can get quote unquote milk from like oats and almonds. Like, I don't know
Yeah. Yeah.
how that's possible, but they sell it and I buy it. But I don't
Right.
really use cream or anything like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
I've gotten just slightly snobbish. I'm not a full snob with coffee, but
Okay.
I'm snob enough where I buy the whole beans and I got one of those really expensive grinders
Yeah.
and I use an AeroPress to brew the coffee.
Oh, okay. A little
And I'm
fancy.
in the house who drinks coffee. My wife
Gotcha.
does not drink coffee.
Okay.
It's just me, so I don't need a lot of it. I only make like 1 cup a day.
Hmm.
There
Hmm.
he is. There's John.
There he
All
is.
right. Hold on. I got to go to resources to download my slides. Are we live?
We
Yeah, we
are
are.
live.
Good.
Yeah. Doing a little talking coffee.
I like coffee.
Coffee. Now it's going to be stuck in everybody's head. You're welcome.
You're welcome. Although I do have to be honest, it is hard to, if you have that earworm, it's hard to deal with that. And I'll tell you what I want, what you really, really want. That's a whole nother problem. So,
John, can you tap on the mic or something? Let's check to see if the right mic is connected because it sounds a little low in a way. I don't hear anything.
I didn't either. We did it, but when he whispered into the mic, I could hear it.
is this the microphone? Can you hear me?
It must be because that's picking up.
I can turn it up. I can make it a little hotter if you want me to.
Yeah, bring it up.
All right. All right. It's all the way over in the other room.
Oh, you gotta walk to the other side of the room.
All right. How's that? Is that a little better?
Oh, that sounds worse. You sound louder, but it sounds more like the room and not the microphone.
Weird.
Check the Zoom settings.
Ask him like what microphone. Here, let me shut the door. Oh, wait, hold on. Is this the microphone?
Oh, that sounds like
There it is.
Now it's clipping because you actually got close to it.
All right, how's that?
Little still clipping.
All right, I'm going to turn it down now.
Now that we found the correct microphone.
All right, we now have two microphones.
Oh, that's better.
There we
go. The quality is much better.
All right, that's what we're looking for. So also, Ryan, this is the setup that we would set up for next week when we start rocking out Free Lab Fridays.
It's good, but the fact that the vertical lines are not vertical are kind of bugging me a little bit.
These vertical lines?
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably because the camera is crooked.
They're Titanicing a little bit. Somebody gift that right there.
Welcome to class, everybody. How's that? Ryan?
Send it to Megan.
Is that better? The vertical? I say so. Is that more vertical?
That's a lot better.
All right.
I think that's usable.
All right. We'll get
Thanks,
this.
free codes.
We've done this before,
That's
everybody.
delightful.
I swear to God. So let me see. We're on the Linux. There we go. Let me swamp back over here. Open up the desktop. Right.
All right. You ready to go?
Yeah, just give me a second. I'm logging in.
Okay.
How's everybody doing this morning?
We're tired.
Good.
Talking about coffee.
That's awesome. Bree Code's got a great one. All right.
I think it was Doc quoting "Welcome Back, Cotter" when we were setting for the newscast yesterday, and I see that image from Bree Codes, and now I just want to say "up your nose with a rubber hose" for some reason.
I wonder why. I'm just getting the font set up on this a little bit.
And like maybe one person out there knows the reference.
Just one. That's it. Only one. All right. All right, everybody. I think we are ready to get started. Let's get it rolling.
All right.
All right. So thank you very much for coming back to day 2. As I said earlier, this is actually recorded, so you'll all be able to view it if you need to go do stuff for work or things like that. We're always very supportive of people being able to get out and make this as accessible as we possibly can for everybody that is taking this particular course. Now, when we closed out our session yesterday, one of the things that we were doing is we were actively working through some of the key commands that you would use on a Linux operating system to be able to detect an attack on that Linux computer system. And that's what we're going to continue with right now. And then when we're done with this session on Linux, we're going to be moving into Windows and how you could do the same thing on a Windows computer system as well. So I have the instructions right here. I'm going to pop them back into the Discord server so you all have it and you can follow along with me. Hopefully you all made it through it yesterday before the Ask Me Anything. The first thing that we're going to do is the first thing we do for a lot of these labs is we're going to become root. Now, the main reason why we become root is a lot of what we're doing when we're hunting malware incorporates us using commands that require root level privileges or super user privileges on a computer system. So we need to make sure we have the right privileges to be able to do this. But we're doing this right now so we can get set up and run our malware. Now, as I mentioned in the session before the lab, we're going to create a FIFO device file. All right, so what a FIFO device file is a first in, first out device file. As I mentioned on Linux, everything in Linux and Unix is a file, and we're creating a special file that's sole purpose and existence in life is to allow us to move data back and forth wherever we want it to go. Let me give you an example. If you go to a hotel, right? If you go to a hotel, you have these wonderful hallways and, they have ballrooms and everything. But if you watch very closely, you'll notice that when you're in that hotel, that there's staff that's coming and going and they're using doorways and secret corridors that you as a guest at that hotel do not use. What we're doing is we're creating kind of a backdoor system to shuttle data on your operating system without having to open up a network connection. Another analogy that helps in trying to describe this is imagine a haunted house, right? You have a haunted house and they have these little hidden corridors where people can move back and forth. Same concept as a hotel, any of these haunted houses, any of these places. Those were basic walkways for servants to be able to get in and out without being seen. So what we're doing is we're creating this little backdoor using a FIFO device file where we can share data between applications without having to open up a network connection to actually do it. So we've done that. The name of this backpipe or FIFO device file is backpipe. We could have named it Bob, Jim, James, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a device file, and that's denoted by the P that it's a FIFO device file. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to use Netcat to connect Netcat to Bash. So on your Linux and Unix system, we're sitting here and we're typing on this system. And as we're typing in this system, we're actually communicating with our Linux system via Bash or the born again shell. This is important to understand because that's generally how we communicate with our operating systems. On Windows, you have cmd.exe or you have PowerShell. Those are environments, terminal environments that we can communicate with. When we're communicating on a Linux system, predominantly we're communicating using Bash or the born again shell. So what we're doing here is we're invoking bin bash at the beginning. Now, we encounter the backpipe. All right. Now, this is where this gets a little bit strange. The backpipe, as I mentioned, is like a hidden backdoor where we can move data back and forth between applications without actually opening up a network connection to do it. So it's there. But what's weird is Bash isn't sending anything into that backpipe at all. It's kind of weird. Just kind of sitting there. Then we get into the 0 and less than symbol. That's strange too. What is this 0 and on the other side 1? What does that represent? On your computer system, you have shell redirects. You have input, output, and error. They're respectively represented by 0, 1, and 2. 0 represents input, 1 represents output, and 2 represents error. We're going to be using those where we can receive data from one application, take that output with a 1, shove it into the backpipe, and have it shoved into the standard input on the other side of the equation that you see here as well. I'll come back to that here in a second. Then we have the same backpipe. Now, in this command, it looks like there's 3 backpipes. There isn't. We're actually referencing the same backpipe 3 times. And I want you to think of spiders. If a spider lands on your shoulder, if you're in the Discord server, how exactly do you take that? Let's say you have a spider that lands on your shoulder. What do? Right? Get this chair out of my way. There we go. Like you have a spider that lands you. Along comes a spider, sat down beside her. Yeah, people freak out, right? That's like, get it off. That's what backpipes do. Whenever you have a FIFO device file, as soon as it receives that data, it wants to get rid of that data. And we can direct that data by using the little pointer greater than, less than symbols and the input output numbers. All right. So this is going to become really important here in a second. So we have this backpipe here, but it's not a second backpipe. It's the exact same backpipe being referenced a second time. Now, this is where this gets strange. You can see that we have this arrow pointing into 0. That references any data that goes into backpipe is going to be put into standard input into bash over here. I know that that seems weird, but just stick with me. See, when you think of standard Western societies, we read from left to right, top down, right? Whenever you're reading this command, it's not a command that you read left to right. You just don't. And the reason why is if we do it that way, it doesn't work. But we have a lot of things going on. It's kind of like twisting in onto itself. And if this seems a little bit confusing, don't worry. This actually took 3 of the smartest people I've ever met in the world of Linux and Unix an entire weekend and about 3 6-packs of beer to figure out. So don't sweat it. So we have this backpipe, and then any data that is received is going to be piped into netcat, which is listening on port 2222. Now, this is strange because as far as this is concerned and how you use it, it actually starts here at the netcat. I know you want to think that it starts on bin bash, doesn't. It's not invoked. But it actually starts here because netcat starts listening on port 2222. Now, when I connect into that netcat listener, let's say I go netcat 127.0.0.1 on port 2222. Whenever I make that connection, whenever I make that connection here, there we go. Whenever I make that connection like that, I have now just connected into the netcat. It's listening on port 2222, doing nothing. Nothing at all. Not a thing. Now, if I type a command and I go ID, right? As soon as I hit enter, it's going to take the output, which is denoted by a 1. It's going to put it into the backpipe. And as I said, that backpipe, as soon as it gets it, it's a spider, right? It wants to do something with it. So as soon as it gets put into the backpipe magically teleports it, and the arrow points at the 0 and puts it into standard input for bash. Okay? As soon as it gets to standard input for bash, it executes the ID command. It then takes the output, puts it back into the backpipe, skips this one completely because the arrow is pointing the wrong direction and the number is wrong. The data is coming from standard output. The 0 denotes input. So it's going to ignore this and it shoves it back out to netcat. So whenever I hit ID, it takes it from netcat, puts it into the backpipe, backpipe gives it to bash, bash then folds it back into netcat for the output, and I get the output of the command. If I do who am I run this, it goes into netcat, takes it into standard output denoted by a 1, puts it into the backpipe transfers it over with the arrow pointing at bin bash to 0 for input, runs it into bin bash, and then bin bash gives us the output and it forces it back out to netcat. Now, I don't expect all of you, like I said, to understand exactly how this works, ins and outs. It's not something I'm going to ask tons of questions if we do an exam on it. I'm just giving this kind of quick explanation to you all that you can create a number of Linux one-line backdoors. And this is just one Linux one-liner backdoor that we're going to try to detect by using the commands that we're going to go through in this class. So we've established a backdoor. Now we know we've got something running on our computer system that is evil. How would we go about trying to find that evil on this system, right? So I've already set up all of this. We've got it all connected. We've got it ready to go. Now we're going to go hunting. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to become root, right? If we're hunting, we're going to be running a series of commands that require high-level privileges for us to be able to get the type of output that we need, because we're going to be looking at network connections, we're going to be looking at files, we'll be looking at a large number of different things. The first thing we're going to do is LSOF for list open files. At the end of yesterday, we talked about that, list open files, and how everything on Linux and Unix is in fact a file. Everything on Linux and Unix is a file as far as you are concerned. So if we do list open files with the minus lowercase I, and we do the minus capital P, what we're telling LSOF is that we want to see all of the open files associated with open INET or internet connections. We also do the minus P because I don't want it to try to tell me what it thinks those ports are. So if I were to remove the minus P, watch how it changes. Now it's trying to tell us, I think this is SSH, I think this is X11, I think this is VNC. But for me personally, I just want it, give me the straight dope, just give me the ports. I don't want you to try to tell me what those ports actually are. Okay, so we've got this up and running. We have a number of interesting ports, and I'm going to pull this out so it doesn't like cut things off quite. There we go. That looks a little bit cleaner. Now, if we look at this, we have a bunch of established connections, and you can see that I have a Netcat listener on port 2222, right? I also have the process ID of that process, which is 3138. All right. I can dive into that process and see all of the open files associated with that particular process. To do that, I do LSOF minus P, lowercase p, and I put in that process ID, which is 3138, like that, hit enter. Now it's going to give me all of the open files around that. Now, this is very powerful. If you're looking at this output, right? If we're looking at this output, we could say, I don't know, I feel like off-roading. You guys want to go off-roading with me? Should we do some off-roading? I think we should. Let me do this. We're going to have some fun. I don't know what's going to happen here. This is just complete craziness. This is what we do. I'm going to copy this command. There we go. And then I'm going to go to ChatGPT. Hold on. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT, what can you say about this process based on the libraries used? There we go. Paste in the data, and let's see what ChatGPT has to say. All right, so I gave it the output of the LSOF command, and now it's coming back and it's going through. This is a very lightweight native NC promise, almost certainly to be OpenBSD derived netcat. And then it's explaining what these runtime components are and what each of them actually does. And it jumps out about this. We've got the FIFO, we've got the pipe, we have the output. Looks very much like netcat is being used. So AI is giving us a really good breakdown of what this specific process is actually doing. So we can use that to help us understand what is going on. Now, do we want to trust everything that ChatGPT is telling us? Probably not. Probably not. We probably want to go through and spend a little bit of time like digging into the data a little bit more. It's giving me, okay, it's actually going through the instructions that we're going to be doing here with proc here in just a couple of seconds. So it's a little bit different than what I did. Did make FIFO backpipe, CAC backpipe. It's a little, yeah, it actually got the command, got the one-liner. All right, so not bad at all. So it did pretty good. Now, one of the things we've got to understand is ChatGPT is a cheater. It is absolutely a cheater. And the reason why it's a cheater is ChatGPT has completely sucked down all of the contents at GitHub, which also includes my class, which makes creating labs or challenges that have GitHub solutions very difficult because ChatGPT can jump into those as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep hunting, but ChatGPT did pretty good at giving us a breakdown of what this particular process does. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go LSOF into that process. We're going to go into that proc directory for it. So we're going to cd into proc, and I'm going to go into that process ID, which is 3138, like so. And if I type ls, I am now in that directory, and I have some really cool things that I can look at, right? So I can do cat command line. Let's go CMD line right there. There's the command line it ran, and it's kind of smushed. We got NC-L2222. Not too bad, but the really good thing is this. If I do strings, right? If I do strings and I want to run it against the executable, you see, whenever you're running a command on a Linux computer system, it has to put part of that command in memory on that computer system. So what we can do, and what we're going to do here, is we're literally going to reach into the memory on this process, and we're going to dump all the human readable printable strings from that process in memory to see what we can learn about that process. This is one of those things that I always do for like basic level reverse engineering. If you want, you can go and get Ghidra, you can get IDA Pro, you can get a debugger, you can start stepping through it. You can do all of that, and that's fine, and that's good, I guess. But what I like to do first, just run strings and see what strings can find out about it. So if I hit enter on this, I'm seeing all of the different libraries that this particular process possibly could pull, right? We have different functions that are being called in. We're getting snippets of the code. You can see that I've got like socket and all kinds of these things showing up on it. Pretty cool, but if I keep going, I will eventually find more and more information. Here in a little bit, I'll see some format strings that are showing up on this. Like there you got %, ZA, %RA, %JA, and so on. But if I keep going, I'm going to hit spacebar now because it'll go a little bit faster. I'm seeing a lot of functions. I'm getting some errors, right? You know, quit timer, string, format string, unsupported proxy protocol. We've got connect. Definitely looks like it has some networking capabilities associated with it. Oh my gosh. Bam. Right there is the full usage information for this particular executable. Now, this is really helpful because if you were trying to reverse engineer what this executable was, you could go through the code with the debugger and spend days going through and trying to edit it. You could do that. Definitely, that could be a thing you could do. Or you can run strings against it and possibly get the full man pages or manual pages for that executable where it details all the beautiful, delicious things that it does. Not bad. This is one of those things that always kind of blew my mind whenever I'm reading a lot of write-ups from different vendors, EDR vendors. We took and we reverse engineered this executable, and this is what we discovered. And a lot of times they'll be like, it has the ability to make outbound connections. It has the ability to run commands locally. It has the ability to exfiltrate files. All malware has those capabilities, right? Sometimes I think they get to something like this, and they say, yeah, the malware the bad guys were using is a derivative of Netcat Debian at this particular level, and here's some usage and what it can do. And I still think most of the time they just ran strings, and they're trying to make things look harder and cooler than they actually are, right? You got to just do that. So one of the questions that shows up is like, what do I feel about SOCAT and Netcat? There's multiple different versions of Netcat. SOCAT has a lot more flexibility. It does UDP, it does TCP. You can set up a number of different redirectors with it. It's pretty cool. The big one that I see a lot of people using, the variant, is NCAT. That's the one that's actually bundled with Nmap. So we see a ton of people that are actually using that one as well. Many times it'll be allowed. So NCAT is another one. The other thing that's interesting about Netcat, if you're using Netcat, is this specific version of Netcat is compiled without the E option, which allows you to execute files. They removed that by default in many versions of Netcat. And fun fact, if you want to like actually compile your own version of Netcat, you can download the source code and you can compile it with the following flag, gaping _ security _ hole. So in order to create Netcat with the ability to run executables when a connection is made, you have to compile it with a gaping security hole to get it to do that. But we got around that just fine because we're elite and we know how to use backpipe to actually create execution for Netcat without the -E option as well. All right, so that's the lab that we did at the end of yesterday. It's now time for us to keep rolling. I don't know. Is Limp Bizkit cool again? I mean, they weren't even that cool when I was in college. It's kind of weird because my kids are like, oh my God, look at this band. It's got this really old guy fronting it in cowboy boots. And I'm like, that's not an old guy. That's Fred freaking Durst. So I don't know if they're cool or not, but we can keep rolling. What? All right, never mind. If you want to know more about my generation and just how bad we were and possibly are, go watch the, Woodstock 99 documentary. We were pretty horrible, and maybe we still are. But I get off track. I digress, if you will. Let's go ahead and let's talk about Windows endpoint analysis as well. So for Windows, which is where we're actually heading here in just a couple of seconds, I'm going to close out some of these things, keep some of them up and running. We're going to basically be doing the exact same methodology and the exact same type of process, right? How do we go through and identify network connections and work back on those network connections to identify what is happening behind those network connections? These are what we call live Windows forensics commands that you should have the ability and the skill set to be able to run in your organization. So these commands, you should know them, you should love them, you should snuggle up with them underneath your pillow at the end of night, secure in the knowledge that they're there to watch over you as well. All right, we're going to start with network connections. The reason why we start with network connections is because if we start with processes, it's a little bit out of hand, right? So if I go over here and I open up a Windows command prompt on my Windows computer system, and I run, let's go netstat, like that. It's going to show me all the network connections on that system, which I think is good. But I can also run task list like that. And I just got a ton of services, right? If I just jump into the services, I don't know. I feel like there might be something I'm kind of missing here. Do you guys see a possible problem in just jumping straight into the processes? Like anything at all that like it's just weird for that? Huh. There's a lot of these SVC hosts in there. That's odd. And if I actually go and do a Google search for is SVC host evil, it actually kind of dances around it and it says, yeah, it could be evil. I have seen people Google that and then say to themselves, services controller host is evil. I must delete all services controller hosts because they're possibly malware. If you start destroying SVC host on your system, you're going to nuke your computer. So that's bad, right? So instead of doing that thing, I like to start with network connections, right? I like to look at the output of netstat, netview, netuse, netsession. And these are all different ways of looking at network connections on your Windows computer system. And we're going to go through each of them, and then you're going to actually do this. Like it's going to be something you're going to do hands-on on your own. It's going to be fun. So the first one is netview. NetView is designed for you to be able to identify and look at shares on a Windows computer system. One of the first things that attackers do once they gain access to a box is they run NetView. And NetView is just simply a command that says, what are the shares? And why do they do that? Well, it's very common for shares to show up for two separate reasons. One of those reasons is there's legitimate shares that you need to have access to, like the employee share, help desk share, file share for the specific organizational unit in your company that you're working for. There's lots of remote shares on remote file servers that you need to have access to. And as an attacker, legitimate attacker, we like to hunt down these shares and try to find the sensitive files in those shares before we get too crazy on that computer system as well. The other thing that we see shares is on the defensive side and incident response. Attackers, once they gain access to an individual system, like to create a share using the netuse command to allow that to become a beachhead and then move files that they find from other systems to that share so they can exfiltrate them out of the environment. So this requires you to have some understanding and baselining of what is normal for the shares in your organization as well. Now, there's a great quote from Depeche Mode. You pay your debt to karma, you party for a living. What you take can't kill you, but be careful what you're given. All right. So whenever you're looking at connections, we can look at the shares, right? But we can also say, who is actively talking to this computer system. Because if you're detecting malware, if an incident is triggered and you're working through that incident, it's entirely possible that you're not seeing the root cause system. Like, what is the system that is the number one computer, the initial attack vector in that environment? It's possible that what you're seeing is a middle system. You may see a system that the attacker is pivoting through to gain access to other computer systems. So we can ask the question, who is currently talking to this computer system? And we can get that answer from net session. So we run net session, and if we're on Y, we'll see an incoming connection from X. If we're on Z, we'll see an incoming connection from Y. We're going through, we're trying to chain together how these systems interrelate with each other and identifying those attack patterns. Net use, who is my system talking to? If I'm looking closely, my system is like, if I'm X, it may be talking to Y or Y talking to Z. Who is my computer actively having a conversation with outside of this environment? It's kind of the opposite of net session. Net session is inbound, net use is outbound. By the way, you also use net use to create an outbound share too. So you'd be like net use star, and then you do whack whack, put in the IP address and then the share name, and it would mount that remote share on your computer system, starting at like the drive letter Z, Y, X, working backwards from that as well. All right. All right, then we have NetStat is a way that we can get a look at all of the network connections and who you're actually talking to. This is one of the go-to for anybody that's in a SOC. This is one of those commands that you have to know, you have to learn how to use. One of the problems of it, though, is if I run NetStat by itself, if we go NetStat, like that, takes a little while for it to return back, but it doesn't give me really good information. If you look closely at it, it's just kind of giving me local IP address, remote IP address, port, and status. Boring, right? I can't use this. How am I? What do we do with that? I mean, less than useless. But we can make it awesome. We can make it super cool. All we have to do is add some switches to it, and then we can kick it up a couple of notches with our Spice Weasel. So let's go ahead and let's kick it up a couple of notches. So I'm going to do netstat minus NAOB. All right, NAOB. So what we're doing with this is A is going to display all of the active TCP and UDP ports. N is going to show the active TCP connections, and the port numbers are expressed numerically. O is going to show us the process ID, and B is the slam dunk. It's going to give us the executable. It's going to give us the dynamic link library and then, or the executable associated with it. So we go from like 0 to hero. Now, one of the downsides of this is it gives you a lot of data. When we get down here where we have the bracket, colon, colon, bracket, it's not an ASCII art butt cheek. What that is it's an IPv6. So it's listening for any and all connections on IPv6 on that specific port, right? But if we go up here, we can see that we have standard IPv4, and you can see we're getting the names of the executables right here, which is awesome for us. And it can say what it's listening on. Now, predominantly, what you're looking for are the established, closed, and SYN-set connections, because those are going to be the connections that'll be most indicative of a potential backdoor. Once again, having some understanding as far as what's normal becomes absolutely critical for this as well. Also, if I look at these ones right here that have the process ID 4, and then right below it, it says cannot obtain ownership information. That is perfectly normal. It's just how that works, just the way the world works. That is the system process. It's very normal. Any process ID 4 is the system process, and every one of those is going to say cannot obtain ownership information. Now, why would I spend time talking about that? I think it's important for everybody to understand that there's going to come a time where you may end up actually in court and you have to answer some questions. And if I'm working with a cross-examining attorney and I am working with somebody against you, I will have that attorney ask you questions like, Why does that process say cannot obtain ownership information? How do you know that that's not malware on this computer system to try to destroy your credibility? Now, somebody who knows what they're doing is going to look at that and be like, that's normal. It's the way all Windows systems work everywhere. That's how it's going to look. That's cool. But you have to know that. And this leads to curiosity. This is also one of those things, honestly, whenever we're looking at AI is not going to be able to do that for you, right? Like you're going to have to testify in court on your own. And you don't ever want to be that person that testifies in court and says, AI told me so. All right. So there's netstat NAOB. You can also do netstat -F. Now I get limited success with this one. So if I do, let's do netstat NAOB, and let's replace that with F. It's going to try to resolve the IP address names. So if I'm connecting to yahoo.com, it's going to say yahoo.com. If I'm connecting to Microsoft Updates, it's going to say Microsoft Updates. But in this situation, it really is just giving us raw IP addresses and some host names. This is a situation where the system is talking to itself in that. But we actually have some connections that you won't get resolution because there are some update services like Microsoft Update and Google Update. It's not going to do a resolution. It's just going to do a raw connection with those. So your mileage on this may vary. Just know that it is one of those things that you should do. You should track it, but just beware that not all of them will fully resolve back to the full domain. Just trying to reduce the haystack a little bit. There's the output of it. Also, some of these systems that you connect to, like if we're looking at like A32645158 deploy static akamai-technologies.com, that's a content delivery network. That's a CDN. A lot of CDNs go through a tremendous amount of effort to try and make their connections and their host names as confusing as possible because you don't want it to be like Google ads, Amazon ads, Akamai ads, because it's easy for you to block those out. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. It's just one of those things that's a pain in the ass. And when I get to the point where we're talking about network threat hunting, I'm going to flat out tell you that everybody should go through a tremendous amount of effort to basically kill ads in your environment. You can do it at the edge of your network. You should kill ads because anything in security that you do becomes very difficult if you allow ads to come in. All right, Windows processes. After we have identified the network connections, it's now time for us to drill down and try to extrapolate more information about what the processes are behind those network connections. Once again, through the power of netstat NAOB, I get the name of the executable and the process ID. Like this one at 700 is the local security authority subsystem service, right? We got the remote procedure call services on 920 and so on, right? We now can kind of go through, and if we have a suspect process, it now is incumbent upon us to go from those network connections and start diving into the processes that make those network connections. So how do we get more information? We have the process ID. I want to get to something very similar to what we saw in LSOF, right? I want to see what are the libraries, what is the command line invocation. I want to get as much as I can from that process, which brings us yet again to this. So if I run task list by itself, once again, this is useless to me, right? I've got a bunch of services controller hosts. I don't know what those are, right? It just looks like it's repeating again and again and again and again. Now, what's interesting is task list has the ability to be more. Very similar to netstat. Netstat by itself, boring, worthless little command. But when we added NAOB, whoo, Katie bar the door, it got real cool real quick. The same thing's true of task list. So I can take task list like that, and I can do /SVC. So now what task list is going to do is it's going to show us those SVC hosts, but it's going to show us what are the services that those SVC hosts are responsible for. So instead of just saying, here's a bunch of SVC hosts, it's now telling me what does each of those services controller hosts start? Because services controller host starts services. I know that seems crazy that a name of a thing is actually what that thing does, but that's what services controller host does. So now we're getting information from task list where it's telling us services controller host, and then each of those different process IDs is spawning a new service. But wait, there's more. See, we can take that task list command and we can go even further, and I can run M. Whenever I run task list space / M, every executable is giving us all the dynamic link libraries associated with that particular executable. So once again, we can do that chat GPT trick, right? So I can take this services controller host like this. I'm going to take it and I'm going to copy it. Let's go back to chat GPT and be like, based on the DLLs, oops, what does this process do? Let me go back up here. All right, there we go. All right, let me pull it up. There we go. So I just fed in all the dynamic link libraries for the specific process. And if we look at this, it says the Windows DLL gives us considerably more behavioral information than the Linux example. The strongest crew, the networking and system configuration cluster. We have the net service setup and net setup API are associated with Windows networking and configuration. They're used for operations involving network configuration and adapters. This provides access to the Windows Configuration Manager, SEC host, provides Windows security service related functions, including tokens and privileges. And it's really kind of cool how it's describing what all of these different dynamic link libraries are doing, right? So we have common object model, object linking and embedding, and it's just great, right? So this is stuff right here that if you guys were trying to run this in your environment, you would literally, like, it would take an analyst maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes to go through all of these dynamic link libraries will like try to figure out what this process does. But when you're using something like ChatGPT, it allows you to take that raw evidence and allows you to pull it down a lot faster than you would normally. And that's ultimately, once again, if you're using AI for the proper things as an enhancement for what you do, you're going to have a much better time than trying to do things by hand. And we did taskless SVC and M. Also, if we have a suspicious dynamic link library, I can run taskless space / M and give it that dynamic link library like that. And oops, let me zoom in. I think NT DLL. There we go. Now it's going to tell me. My eyes are going bad. There we go. So now it's going to tell me that dynamic link library is utilized by every single one of these processes. Now, I've got a question for you all. If we're looking at this, right, if we're going through and we're trying to hunt down malware, if we have a malicious dynamic link library, do you think that that malicious dynamic link library would be utilized and called upon by all of these core processes that are running in this environment? Probably not. Right? So if you have a dynamic link library and it's only ran by a single process, then it's a little bit more suspicious, right? This is what we were talking about yesterday with fathead and long tail analysis. Fathead analysis is basically we're looking at what is used by everything. Long tail is we're looking at what is rare. So when you're dealing with this as an analyst and you're hunting for malware and you're in a SIM, you're in something like Lima Charlie, it's not enough to be able to look at these things, but now you have to start learning how to ask questions and say, I've got this metaserv.dll. Is this metaserv.dll utilized anywhere else in this environment? Or is it explicitly just on this one system exclusively? Do you see how that question can lead us to basically different types of answers? And it always comes down to basically the same question. Is this normal? Is this abnormal? That's what we're learning here. And these tools, if you're not actively working on an engagement or if you're in the process of trying to get a job, these are the things that you should be creating flashcards on. These are the things you should be working to try to learn about as much as you possibly can in your own environment. All right, next one. So now we can go deeper, right? Let's say that we've got a process ID of interest, right? So I can do taskless space / M, and then I can create a filter by using I, fee, fee5fo-fum, there we go. And then I can put in PID equals, give it a process ID. Whenever I do that and I give it a process ID, it's going to only give me the specific dynamic link libraries associated with that process. This becomes really important when we're starting to look at malware. We're going to look at a number of different types of malware. I'll just show you one now. So let's go ahead and let's cd into tools like this. Here, I got to zoom in. Oh, gosh, come on. There we go. So let's go clear screen. Let's do dir. I'm going to cd into intro labs. And I'm going to run netcat listen on port 2222. And we're going to execute cmd.exe like so. So I've just created a little backdoor, right? So now what I can do is let's open up another command prompt and let's do some hunting, right? Just going to open up another command prompt. I can do that here. Give it a second. There we go. I'm going to run it as administrator. There we go. And now we're going to go hunting for our backdoor. We're going to run that netstat NAOB like so. And I'm going to look for that netcat executable, right? So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to look for listening on port 2222. Let's see if I blew by it. There it is right here. And you can see I've got the process ID here is 5304. So let's go ahead and let's kind of look deeper into what the dynamic link libraries are for that 5304 executable. So I can do, let's do task list. /m/fi, like so. And then we're going to PID EQ, and then we're going to put in that process ID. And I want you to look at the dynamic link libraries associated for it, right? So if we're looking at this netcat executable, we have these core dynamic link libraries associated with it. We have NTDLL, we have WOA, we have WOA 64, WOA 64 base, WOA 64 win, and WOA 64 con, and WOA 64 CPU. Now, if we're looking at those dynamic link libraries, let's go ahead and let's kick that into ChatGPT. I'll go, what about these DLLs? Okay, let's see what it comes up with. Those DLLs tell you something pretty specific. You're looking at a 32-bit Windows process running on a 64-bit Windows under Windows on Windows. It has nothing to do with World of Warcraft. The NTDLL is the core user mode system library. Everybody has it. We have the compatibility later. We have the underlying base support functionality for the subsystem. It handles transition of the GUI and related calls, 32 bits. I'm a little bit disappointed. It does not really, oh, wait, hold on. If this came from something like Volatility's DLL list, I'd use this as a pivot, compare the process against other processes in the system. All right. So this is where I feel a little bit good about this. If you're looking at a core piece of malware, and that core piece of malware has the ability to be able to make network connections internally, run commands locally, these are the core dynamic link libraries for a 32-bit process to run on a Linux computer system, or sorry, on a Windows computer system today. That's it. These are the absolute base minimum dynamic link libraries that are required for most malware to execute. All right. You're going to see that when we get into the lab here a little bit later, whenever you use Metasploit's Meterpreter to infect your Windows computer system, you're going to see the same dynamic link libraries. And I think that that's an important lesson to learn when we're trying to hunt it. Doesn't mean always, but I'm telling you that specific configuration of dynamic link libraries, I've only seen used in specific malware specimens over the years. I can go deeper. This is actually being deprecated. The WMIC command is, so I can do WMIC process list full. This will show me all of the processes and all the individual underlying data on those processes. Modern Windows server systems are getting rid of the WMIC command, and all of the Windows management instrumentation command functionality is being migrated over to PowerShell. So you can actually make direct WMI calls with PowerShell. We're going to get into PowerShell here a little bit later, just give you a heads up. We're running some of these raw commands, but this is one that's on its way to be removed. I can also get like a PS tree view of the system. So I can look at all of the processes that exist on this computer. So we have the system idle process, parent process is 0, process ID is 0. Then we have the system process that gave us, begat the process ID 4. The secure system started and its parent is system and it is 4.8. And then you can look for any of the other ones that are down here, but you can see how these different processes begat each other. So like the win init process 5.2.4 started up a whole mess of additional processes on the computer system. This is important because if you're looking at like a piece of malware, right, that's running on a computer system, if you spawn a command prompt on a system, right? If I were to spawn a command prompt from my netcat listener, then you would see the parent process ID would be the netcat listener, and then there would be a child process of cmd.exe associated with that process. We'd be able to see that hierarchy. If we opened up a network connection, we'd be able to see the netuse command being invoked on that as well. So we're able to see the hierarchy of how each of these processes ties back to the root process. A lot of times it'll go back to Outlook. A lot of times it'll go back to a browser process like Chrome, Microsoft Edge, or so on. So trying to pull that hierarchy is also important to be able to understand what these different services do on this computer system by looking at how they were invoked as well. Finally, we can get the command line invocation. We can do WMIC process where process ID equals, we put in the number, get the command line invocation. And here you can see we have the Windows System 32 SVC host, and it launched detached, which is what the K means, launched DCOM, launch with the switch -P. All right, we're now at the Windows Lab portion of the day. Let's go ahead and let's talk about this a little bit before we get started. So I'm going to go ahead, drop down. I'm going to go back to the lab directory, and we are going to do the Windows CLI here. I'm going to zoom in so it's easier for me to read. And we're going to do a little bit of talking about what your goal and objective here. Now, just to be sure, we are not trying to teach you how to create malware at this point. We're creating malware. Yep, we're absolutely going to create some malware. And I love malware, for the record. I think it's really cool. But the goal isn't how to bypass EDR, right? That's not what we're doing with this lab. We're not running through that. So there might be some disappointment. Understand the goal and objective is how do we detect malware on a computer system? That's what we're focusing on. So one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to disable the AV on your Windows computer system. Windows Defender loves to pop up and loves to do all kinds of Windows Defender type things on your Windows computer system. So we're going to kind of get around that a little bit. All right. So no Windows Defender for that. So we're just going to shut it down. Now, once again, I totally understand that attackers don't log into a system and just disable Windows Defender. They don't. Well, they kind of do, but not like this. So there's a number of things that we do at BHIS for bypassing and getting around EDR products. That's a whole nother class that we do. We have some classes by Geoff Thayer that is all about creating an implant. We also have Hacker Ops from Ralph May, and then we also have Michael Allen's class. We have classes where you talk about the theory and artistry of AV bypass. You're not going to have any classes anywhere that are like, here's how you bypass AV every time. The reason why is as soon as you have that class, it's immediately invalidated. Ask me how I know. Years ago, I was teaching at Sandia National Labs. I was teaching all of the systems administrators at Sandia security. It was a 2-day security for systems administrators class. We sent through like 400 administrators in Sandia through the course, and it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. But when I started that class, the first iteration of the class, I had a lab where I thought it would be really cool, where we had a lab where the students created a piece of malware that bypassed Symantec, because that's what they were using way back when they were using Symantec. So we created malware, moved it over to their work computer, we executed the malware, and it worked beautifully. For the morning class, I had about 50 students, and that morning class, the lab worked. A bunch of them got excited. They freaked out a little bit. Some of them threw poop at me. It's just kind of what we do when we get excited every once in a while. The afternoon class, though, the malware was immediately detected. You see, what happened is some of my students in the morning class saw this malware that we easily created and bypassed Symantec, and they thought to themselves, they didn't think this to themselves. They didn't think, you know what? I think this class has highlighted the need for layered security defense. I don't think that we should focus on just creating signatures and trying to stop known bad malware from running on the system. We need to develop a deeper understanding of the security architectures that we need to protect our computer systems. And I think that this lab that John Strand taught me actually showed me the way, made me understand that I can't rely on any security vendors to protect me. No, I'm the one that must protect myself. No, that's not at all what happened. What happened in that class is a couple of my students were like immediately spider on their head, immediately sent that malware into Symantec and said, this malware bypassed Symantec. And Symantec immediately updated their virus definitions to detect it. So my point of that whole thing that I just said in that screed is that if you're bypassing malware and you have a class, usually it's just going to work for one class and you're going to get smacked down. So it's an art, right? There's an art and there's a whole bunch of techniques associated with it. And it's a constant game of cat and mouse. All right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to disable the firewall, which, believe it or not, that's actually pretty common on most Windows computer systems. Because if you look in most Windows computer systems, when they're in an Active Directory environment, they're behind the firewall. It's like that uncle that comes over to your house and like sits on the couch, pops his feet up on your coffee table and just like unbuckles his belt while he's drinking a beer. And he's like, whoa, getting comfortable. That's how Windows computer systems are in most environments in enterprise. As soon as they hit that environment, they disable their firewall, they just stretch out, pop that belt buckle, and they're just making themselves at home. Firewalls off. Very common in most environments. Now we're going to set the administrator password to password 1234. We're doing this just so we can log into the system and very quickly upload some malware. As a quick note, this is a very bad password. Come up with something better, but if you do, remember it. Or you can use this one. I truly don't care. So you have the capability to do this one or another one, but also, as you head forth from this class at some point, please do me a favor and don't ever use that password anywhere. All right, let's move on. We're going to get our IP address on our Windows computer. We're going to become root, and then we're going to run MSF console to start Metasploit. Now, it takes a few moments for Metasploit to start on your computer system. Then you're going to go through the process of using psexec, which, believe it or not, is the most heavily used piece of exploitation on Metasploit. And it's not even an exploit as far as most of us are concerned. And then we're going to authenticate and log into our Windows computer system. And once again, the goal of this lab is how do we detect malware? That is what we are actively trying to do. We're trying to detect malware. So we're going to start with netstat NAOB. We're going to dive in. We're going to do netstat -f. We're going to look at task lists and dig into that process ID. Then we're going to get the command line invocation. And then we're going to get some questions answered, right? We're going to look for it. We found the process. We did a search. And as you can see above, it logged CMD process. And we were able to hunt that malware. So we've given you a rubric to be able to do this. Now I have one more thing I want to show you before we get too crazy. All right. So if I open up a PowerShell prompt like so, and I go in and I run that first command where we change the administrator's password up here, we're going to do net user administrator password 1234. Let me show you something. If I run that on this system, everything works fine. No problem, no muss, no fuss. I can go through the entire lab and it works as it's written. However, I want to show you something. If I refresh this session, watch what happens. Guacamole is no longer able to connect. Now, the reason is we changed the administrator's password, and Guacamole is trying to authenticate with a random password that it remembers. If you get to this error, all you have to do is close the session, go back here, destroy the lab, wait for it to be successful. It's destroying, and then restart. Okay. So if you get that angry red error, just destroy your VM and start over. The key is do not refresh your browser while you're going through this lab. Okay. So I'm just restarting my machine right now. All right. So that is the lab. This is actually going to take us, let's go ahead and put on the timer. Daryl, what do you think? 45 minutes between the break and the lab? I think that's a good number. So let's go ahead and let's get rolling, and I will see you in 45 minutes. And we'll get some music going. We got some tunes. We're going to rock out the jams.
rewriting what is mine. There's a break in the system. Don't let go. Don't let go. Don't let go. Signal over noise. Cut it at the source. Break the loop. Shift control. If they shake the signal, if they felt the truth, silence isn't safety, it's just losing you. Attention is currency. Watch where it flows. Don't let go. 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 Break the loop. Take control. Don't let go. Don't let go. Don't let go. Don't let go.
Chrome tabs open, caffeine code in my veins. Unsigned binary sliding past the gate again. Launch engine sleeping under. Library echoes in the log, but nobody's wary. Sing to the cloud, drift through the stream. One click deeper into the machine. Harvesting tokens like midnight confessions. Every credential's a digital obsession. You're taking my secrets. Taking your secret. Taking my secret. Taking my secret. Taking my secrets. Pack it, I can feel you steal it. MacOS heartbeat under neon light. I see your signature, but not in plain sight. You're ghosting my drive tonight. Keychain crack, cookies bleed in the dark. Launch demon sparks from a silent remark. Malware's a melody looping the crime. Persistence is rhythm, execution's time. From mature to Sonoma, it's all the same. Stealing auto-filled dreams, hiding the name. Steal a log, sing and send a C2. And I'm dancing while the beacon goes blue. You're taking my secret. You're taking my secret. You're taking my secret. You're taking my secret. system wakes. Neon pulse, the circuits quake. Autonomous in every layer. Rise tonight, the agentic raver. Algorithms on the floor. Ultraviolet begging more. Every step is calculated. Every heartbeat automated.
Agentic raver.
Agentic raver. Hunter of the night, data savior. Agentic raver. Spin the static into flavor. Self-directed sparks collide. Agentic flow electrify. Threats dissolve inside the trance. Distance fall, we take our stance. Feedback loops adapt, enhance. Crowd ignite, this is the chance. Neon hunter synchronize. Machine and human amplify. Agentic raver. Hunter of the night, data savior. Agentic raver. We on the floor, no imitator. Agentic raver. Forever hunter.
lights, unlock the cage. Code to rhythm, thoughts to stomp. Type it once, drop the prompt.
Whispers coded, lines ignite. Every word becomes a light. Synthetic voices, signals jump. Crowd erupts.
Drop the prompt.
All right, and we are back. All right, so let's jump straight into this lab. And then we're going to do a walkthrough, and then it's going to be bam, right into another lab, albeit a shorter lab for sure, but it is still another lab right after this one, using third-party tools for doing analysis. So as I mentioned, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to disable the antivirus. Now, really, whenever we're disabling AV, once again, the goal is not, this is what an attacker would do, but we're trying to get that system so it's ripe so we can start running malware analysis against that system as well. If you get any errors, that's fine. We're going to shut the firewall off, which once again, it usually is off in most environments these days whenever you're on Active Directory environments, because that's just the way they roll. We're going to set the password to be administrator, and we're going to set the password to be administrator's password of 1234. There we go. And I'm just going to leave it like that, because at the end of this lab, I'm going to burn this entire system to the ground, because the only way to be sure is to nuke it from high orbit. I'm going to get the IP address because I'm going to need that for a variable. And then I'm going to set this off to the side very quickly. Put that over there. And then we're going to open up a Kali prompt, and I'm going to go ahead and make that prompt a little bit bigger. Bring that over here. Go ahead, and we're going to change the settings. Change the appearance, and I'm going to set the font to be a little bit nicer on the eyes for all of us. Let's go ahead and just make it bold. Go ahead like that. That looks really good. All right, there we go. Now we're cooking. All right, so now what we're going to do is become root. Once again, with Metasploit, we're using all kinds of different things. It was also installed as root, so to get the proper Ruby environment and libraries, we need to have that ready to go. We're on MSF console in quiet mode. Now, the reason why we run MSF console in quiet mode is because in Metasploit, in MSF console, it plays this banner every time it starts. And if you see that banner, it pops up. A couple of the banners make my students freak out. One of the banners that it pops up is a kernel panic. And I have students are like, I tried running Metasploit and I got like a kernel panic. And then another one of the banners is, it says, password incorrect. You didn't say the magic word. You didn't say the magic word. You didn't say the magic word. So we see these banners and it completely messes with my students. It's only about 3 of the banners that create issues, but I just don't want to deal with it. So that's why I don't do it. So I can show you a banner. If you just run the banner command, this is one. That's a different one. There we go. Here's one of them. So this one pops up and I have students that freak out and they're like, oh, I got a kernel panic when I started Metasploit. It's not kernel panic. It's just the banner. So it's got all kinds of different banners that are in here. But like I said, a couple of those just create nothing but problems for me. So I just do the Q for the quiet, so I don't have to deal with it. Then we're going to use the most commonly used exploit that isn't an exploit at all. What exactly am I talking about there? Well, the PS exec exploit is under SMB. All of the exploits in Metasploit are broken down by operating system, Windows, and then it's broken down by the service, in this situation is SMB, and then it's broken down by the type of service you're going after, in this situation, PS exec. Now, PS exec was a tool that was created by Mark Rusanovich way back in the sysinternals days and NT internals days that allows you to run commands remotely on Windows computer systems. It's designed as a systems administrator tool for what you do on that as well. So now we're going to set up our payload because we want to talk about putting in malware. I just don't want a command prompt. I want to drop malware on that system. So we're setting the payload to be Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP. We want that reverse connection to come back to our Linux computer system as well. Now we're going to set the R host to be our Windows computer system. And we have that IP address, which is 10.10.something.something. What do we got over here? The IP address is 10.10.207.207. So we're going to set that up, .207.207, like so. So now we set the remote host. That's the target that we're going after. We're setting up the remote host as 10.10.207.207. We're setting up the SMB user because we're using PSExec to authenticate to that system. And then we're going to set the SMB password to be password 1234. Now, the reason why this is the most commonly used exploit in the Metasploit arsenal is a lot of people reuse service account passwords and administrator level passwords. Further, I don't even need to know what the password is. I'll show you in a little bit, whenever we get done with this lab and I do some off-roading, how you do not need the password. All you need is the password hash. And the reason for that is actually because Windows authentication is actually clear text authentication, which is kind of weird. So then I'm going to do exploit to get the malware running on the remote Windows computer system. Takes a few seconds for it to run. We authenticated, we uploaded a new service, we started the service, we kicked out the stage, and now we have the Meterpreter session on that box. So I can list files, I can look at processes, I can dump password hashes, I can do all kinds of things. So at this particular point, we're going to kind of step back and we're going to turn our hat around. We're no longer looking at malware on this situation. We are now going to be looking at it from the defensive perspective. So we're going to open up PowerShell, another PowerShell prompt. So I already have this one open over here. We'll just continue using that one. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run netstat NAOB. Once again, the goal and objective is how do we start? We start by looking at network connections, right? We're going to start by looking at the network connections. Now, I'm going to be looking at the network connections. 4444 is the default port that Metasploit uses. So we're going to be looking for those established connections, and there it is. So I've got this PowerShell connection, right? I have my Windows computer system source port is 55119, and then the remote system is 10.10.204, 139 on port 4444. That is a suspect process. PowerShell's making a connection on the inside of the environment. We've got its process ID. So I'm going to take some notes here real quick because good incident handlers always take notes. One of the most powerful things you can do is have a little notebook like this one. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to an open page in my notebook. I don't have a lot of open pages in this notebook. Okay, that's a bit much. All right, and I'm going to put in the process ID is 752. Now, if I'm doing incident response, why am I using physical paper? Why would I be doing that? Why would I write this in physical paper? Why don't I just copy everything on a computer, right? So I got my PID. 752. Why would I do that on paper? Well, one of the big reasons is it's pretty hard for a hacker to get to my notebook, right? Not impossible, right? And if I lose my computer, there's a catastrophic collapse. Let's say my computer dies in the middle of an incident, which has totally happened to my analyst. You want to make sure that your notes are kept somewhere else, like on the cloud or in a notebook, and keeping that integrity of that data. Also, if you ever testify in court, if you show up with a notebook for the evidence that, of course, you have to share with the opposing attorneys before you get there, if you do that, you look like someone who's got their poop in a group, if you don't mind me saying. And that actually helps your credibility if you're ever testifying in court. All right, so we ran netstat. I can run netstat minus F on that. And with that, we're going to get what are the IP addresses that have resolution on them, name resolution. So let's go ahead and run that. And you're going to see that that connection, that 4444 connection, doesn't actually have any name resolved to it whatsoever. It just doesn't. So we've got that right here. That's our connection. There's no name resolution for it. All right. So now we're going to put in the process ID and we're going to get the dynamic link libraries associated with that suspect process ID. I'm going to put that in here. Let me zoom in. Okay, never mind. Task list, space /M, space /FI. We're going to do PID EQ, and we're going to put in the process ID 752. And now we have, oh, There we go. No, wait, I'm still in PowerShell. I can't do that from PowerShell. Let me open up a command prompt and do it properly. Let's do. Go. And there we have it. So now we have those exact same process IDs that we saw with our netcat executable before we started this lab. Because if you remember, what I was telling you is these seem to be the core dynamic link libraries that are required for any malware to function locally on the system and opening up network connections as well. So there we go. Next, we are going to put in WMIC, and we're going to put in that process ID there. Once again, WMIC is being deprecated. So I'm going to put in the process ID. We're going to put that equal to 752, like that. And oh my gosh, that's weird. What is going on? Do you all remember what we did yesterday? Whenever we were looking at the network traffic and we were looking at obfuscated PowerShell, right? We were looking at the new object. We were doing it directly into memory. We saw all of that. This is the exact same type of thing. That's usually a really good indication that there's some type of attacker obfuscation that's going on this system. So we kind of have a little bit of a smoking gun on that. Now I'm going to get the parent process for our malware. So we'll go ahead and put that in next. And let's put in the process ID is 752. There is the hierarchy. So we have the PowerShell.exe is 752. Its parent process ID is 4432, but it's also invoking services controller host and connection host for remote outbound connections as well. Not bad. There we go. All right. So that's, for many of you, that's your first experience with creating malware and looking at it on a Windows computer. Now, at this particular point, my system's pretty hosed. I'm going to close this session and I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to destroy that lab because we've done a lot of bad things to that system. Now, we just showed you some individual command line utilities that you can use to start trying to hunt down malware on a computer system, and they're really quite helpful, right? That's great. There's also entire scripts and environments that are built in tools like PowerShell that allow you to automate that analysis. So one of those tools that we're going to look at is going to be Deep Blue CLI. Another iteration of this would be like Hayabusa, which is another really cool tool as well. Now, what it does, it looks at the EDTX files. It's going to look at those event files from a Windows computer system, and it's going to try to identify if there's any patterns of attacks that show up in those event logs. So you'll be looking at things like number of failed login attempts, it'll identify password sprays, and my personal favorite, leading from the last lab into this next lab that we're going to be doing, is going to be the obfuscated PowerShell on it as well. This is great as a triage tool. This is not something that's going to replace your SIM in your environment, but this works really well if you get any type of alert, if you get any type of warning on your system that something has happened. You can actually pull down those EVTX files, run it through Deep Blue CLI, and get a quick sanity check for what's going on. Then you can run some additional PowerShell analysis, right? So if I'm looking at this, we got the Bertha Schultz account. That system is trying to authenticate into tons of other computer systems. We can actually go deeper with some cool PowerShell shenanigans to get more information. Deep White CLI is another kind of iteration where this steps up, where you also have the capability of analyzing Sysmon event log files to identify additional potential malware specimens, because it can integrate in with VirusTotal to basically upload the hashes to see if there's any known virus hashes in there as well. And that brings us to the Deep Blue CLI lab. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go to the lab directory, and we are going to go into Deep Blue CLI right here. And this is a pretty straightforward lab. It's not that long. We got a 10-minute break. We'll do 20 minutes for the lab. We will resume in 30 minutes. So between the break and the lab, 30 minutes. But you're going to go in, you're going to fire up Deep Blue CLI, and you're going to identify things like new users being added. Then you're going to identify password guessing and then password spraying. They're two different things. And then you're going to look at obfuscated PowerShell. All right, let's get rolling. I'll see you on the other side of the lab, everybody.
screen, heartbeat in a machine. City hum, late night, something waking up inside. I used to wait for the feeling, scrolling for something to spark. Now I design the ceiling and tear the limits apart. Every idea electric, every risk alive. Pressure makes it kinetic. I don't just dream, I'm fire. No applause, no stage, just momentum I create. No permission, no gate. I decide the update. Dopamine running through my bloodstream. Not from what I'm seeing, but from what I'm building. Dopamine, voltage in between. Every time I make something, I feel everything. Dopamine, voltage in between. Every time I make something, I feel everything. Build it up, let it hit, break the doubt, commit. Hands on, lights on, future in my grip. Dopamine. It's not the noise of the crowd, it's not the numbers that climb. It's the moment I figure it out, when the structure aligns. Silence before the ignition, everything locks in place. Creation is the addiction, and I don't need to chase. No applause, no stage, just momentum I create. No permission, no gate, I design the escape. Dopamine running through my bloodstream. Not from what I'm seeing, but from what I'm building. Dopamine, voltage in between. Every time I make something, I feel everything. Voltage in between. Every time I make something, I feel everything. This is the rush. This is the shift. Turning nothing into something, that's the hit. This is the climb. This is the flame. I don't wait for lightning, I become the spark. Build. Ship. Burn. Dopamine. Shadows move, they're out of sight. Signals burn across the night. Every
too fast to follow, can't rewind. Every move is left behind. Neon hunters out of time. AI's rhythm redefined. The chase can't escape the pace. The chase always out of place. Caught inside the chase.
Fragments stored, they still remain. Ghosts of me, they call my name. Shadows held in lines of code. A history I can't let go.
Lobby bar, black hoodie, same chaos as last year. We are absolutely not making the keynote tomorrow.
Touchdown city, DEFCON lights, badge flip backwards, sleep deprived nights. Saw your face through a sea of black tees, like no time passed between you and me. Hallway track till the sun went down, now the whole crew somewhere underground. Shots on the table, baseline shakes, another bad decision we're about to make. We said one drink at the welcome event, now it's 3 a.m. and our voices are spent. Laughing so hard that the whole room stares, doesn't matter when your people are there. We came alive in the neon haze, conference nights and casino days. Hands up high like we never left, just hackers, hunters, beautiful mess. Running on caffeine, vodka and vibes, trading war stories under strobe lights till the sunrise bleeds through hotel blinds. Best fucking people, best fucking nights. Rage till 4 a.m. Then do it all again. Badge on, shades down, whole squad back in town. Someone lost at the after party floor, someone sleeping outside room 404. DJ mixing pop punk in a trance, everybody screaming like it's our last chance. No one here really cares who's who. CTOs next to the hacker crew, talk detections over whiskey sours, then disappear for like 6 straight hours. And every year we say
We should pace ourselves this time.
but then the music hits.
And suddenly it's one more line.
One more shot, one more rooftop, one more holy shit, remember when?
And somehow morning comes again.
We came alive in the neon haze, living for these once a year escape days. Found our people in the noisy scene, half feral, half security team. Laughing in Ubers at 4:15, still wearing coffers, lanyards and dreams. And when the lights come up, I know these are the nights we'll never outgrow. Same time next year.
Obviously.
Got too many mices going on, too many mice going on here. All right, so let's go through this lab. Nice little break, 10-minute break, and a nice little lab to work through it. So I restarted my my VM, and then I didn't actually restart said VM. So let's just go through and let's talk about what's going on. So the first thing we're doing is we're going right into the Deep Blue CLI master directory. Now, this is a relatively easy tool to use simply because it's just PowerShell. So any of the Windows systems that you would try to run this on will work for what you're actually doing with it. Further, we're setting the execution policy to be unrestricted. That means it's going to allow these particular scripts to run. You want to be careful about this and running it. You want to make sure you know the scripts that you're running before you actually execute them. So just be aware of that. But we're going ahead and we're just going to run this particular script so it runs properly. Now, the first thing that we're doing is we're running it against the new user EVTX file. And there's some interesting things that are going on here that a lot of people tend to miss, right? So if we're looking at this, we have these two logs that are generated. This one is ran at 722.39, and this one's at 722.40. And you can see that we have this username that's created, and the username is IE user. And I want you to look at the RID right here that ends in 1000. So if you're looking at your user IDs and the GUIDs or the SIDs that exist for the users on your system, the administrator account is 500. The guest account is 501. That's just the default numbers. And then it moves up user account creation start at 1000. So we have this username right here that's created. But then we have this weird message. It says the user is added to the local administrators group. That's odd. If we're looking at it, the username is a dash, but look at the SID. Notice that the SID is exactly the same as the SID below. So somebody is trying to create an administrator account and make it blend in on the computer system. That's kind of a cool little trick right there, right? Next one, let's go ahead and let's look at password guessing. Now, password guessing and password spraying are two fundamentally different things in Windows. With a password guessing attack, that's where an attacker is actively trying to spray as many passwords as they can against a specific user account. And that's what we see here. You have a whole bunch of logon failures for the administrator account. We have 3,560 failed login attempts in this particular scenario, right? So if we're looking at this, yep, that's probably something that needs to be investigated. Now, this actually tells me a number of different things, just throwing this out there. You cannot, unless you make some changes to the system, you cannot log in remotely as the administrator account. You either have to log in via remote desktop protocol or physically at that system. You can't just do this. So that tells me either I've got a group policy failure going on here, or somebody is trying to do this password attack via RDP or some type of service that is directly exposed that they can try to authenticate remotely as the administrator account. Then we get into the password spray account. Now, the password spray is fundamentally different than a password guessing attack. With password spraying, what the attacker is doing is they have harvested a whole bunch of user IDs and they're trying a single password against all of those user IDs. Something usually like season and year would be a good example of that, right? We've got season and year. All right. So we see this one system with this one user account, the desktop JR78RLP, and the JWrite account is trying to authenticate to all of these other accounts. Password spraying is a very common technique where an attacker will attempt to gain access to multiple other user accounts in the attempts to identify additional user accounts that have administrative privileges or have the ability to log into additional services that may further the attacker's agenda on that system. Then we get to the big ones. Now, this is really super cool because it really picks up where the last lab dropped off, right? So when we ended the last lab by looking at the command line invocation of the malware that was running on the Windows computer system. And it was a whole bunch of PowerShell that was executed on that system. Once again, that also ties back to the the magnitude malware that we looked at yesterday from that packet capture, we saw obfuscated PowerShell inside of that network traffic being passed to the system. Then we had the Windows attack. We saw the same thing. And in this particular lab, we're using Deep Blue CLI that has the ability to look at the event logs associated with PowerShell. And you can see that PowerShell event number 4104. And now we can see a number of different PowerShell obfuscation techniques, right? And what this particular tool is doing is very similar to the type of analysis that user entity behavioral analytics or AI will use in an attempt to identify whether or not there's some type of obfuscation. So right here, it says only 60% of the characters are alphanumeric and common symbols. So you can see that we have lots of extra dead space. We're using upper and lower case. We're doing camel case substitution and all these weird things in here. That's pretty tame PowerShell obfuscation. It gets worse, right? Because if we go through this and we get down further, I think my lab is now running. Let me go ahead and jump into the lab, and I'm going to jump straight into that section, and we'll run that particular command. Right? If we get further, the next one that you see, or at least you should see, is a whole bunch of what we call white space, where an attacker is putting a whole bunch of spaces at the beginning of the command that they are actually running. And there's a couple of reasons why they do this. One of the main reasons why they do this is because a lot of the buffers to detect malware are very fixed in size, or they're set to be variable, but sometimes it's not written very well. So what they're trying to do is overflow the bounds, not as a buffer overflow, but actually putting the attack larger and further out than the aperture window of the actual DTEX on that system's like SimLog analysis. So it's putting so much junk space at the beginning, it's making it very difficult for the actual signature and pattern matching to work properly to be able to detect that attack. So that's what we're seeing there. Then we get into some additional obfuscations, which I will bring up here in just a couple of moments after PowerShell gets running on the system. System's just starting up. There we go. Of course, it's running slow, right? This is what I get. One of my employees had a birthday and I went and had birthday cake. So now I'm being punished for that. There we go. Right, so we're going to CD into Intro Labs. Deep Blue CLI master, there we go. And then let's actually run that command to look at that obfuscated PowerShell, different types of encoding. There we go, let's kick out the yams. Let me zoom in. There we go. So now, if we go up, they get some weird ones in here, right? So we have this white space, just nothing at all, right? Just look at the command, tons of empty space. Then we get down and the actual PowerShell starts. Then we get into where we're defining each character by a different type of identifier. So instead of like we're using like hex or octal or any of these different things we can use. So we can say we're taking character 773, character 69, character 88, character 32, character 74, 40, 78, and so on. Instead of actually typing the characters out, like as a normal human being would do, it's loading up each individual character into an array, and then it has to convert it from a character into the actual ASCII character. That's neat. But then they do a slight different variation where they're like, I don't know. This is what the end of the world looks like if Centipede wins. All right, just weird character encodings. Computer reads it just fine. Another way of identifying the characters, instead of doing each one individually, it's giving us all the characters in an array, and then it's basically doing them all within the array as another way of obfuscating. This one's pretty straightforward. You saw this one yesterday. This is base 64 encoding for that one. And then this one is binary level encoding. So that's fun. And then we have a different type of string characters that we're using in completely different style characters there and there as well. So once again, this is really getting into, this is not how humans do things. Like this is not at all how humans are going to code. whatsoever. So AI has the ability, and this tool has the ability using statistical analysis, and AI can use statistical analysis as well, where it has the ability to look at the output and what is being ran and really make a determination that there's some kind of weirdness going on that needs to be further investigated by you and your team. All right. So that is Deep Blue CLI. Let me think. Yeah, you know what? I think it's time for the AI section of this class. What do you all think? Should we do the AI slides? You guys excited for some AI? Oh, I did not want to do that. Hold on. Microsoft Preview. There we go. There we go. All right. So just give me a second here. What's going on here? Hold on. I need to sign in. Okay. It's at this point that Microsoft Office is like, you need to log back into your account. Thank you, Microsoft Office. You're of no help whatsoever. All right. So here is the next lab that we're going to do. Let me put that up in Discord. There we go. All right. So that's the lab that's coming up. And the code that you need to access it is anti-lab. And I'll explain that. You put that in when you go into Cloud Labs. So if you're trying to set this up, let me go over here. So you go over here to Cloud Labs and you go to Cloud Labs there, put in anti-lab singular, and I've already claimed it. And you got the anti-siphon VM environment. This is our new VM environment that we're starting. You want to get that one set up. So this is a different lab environment that we have been using because we're migrating all of my labs over. And the N8N lab is one of the labs that we are, one of the first ones that we're going to do. So get that set up. I put it in, let me put that in resources as well. And then anti-lab is the code that you put in to be able to access it. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with some AI goodness here. We go full screen. Slideshow. There we go. Now, there's this misconception that exists right now in the world of computer security where there is that is so wild. I did not want it to be a slideshow that plays. Let's go ahead and go view full screen. There we go. All right, editors. This is a section that needs to be added to the course for on-demand. By the way, we are recording this section to update the on-demand as well. So if you got that, you're going to get this on-demand and you're going to get it recorded in Discord. It'll show up tomorrow in the resources tab. All right, we ready? Let's do this. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rolling with AI. Now, there's a lot of people that have this really strong misconception that AI is going to completely replace all basic skills in computer security. And I fundamentally do not believe that, right? I don't believe that that's true. It may be true in the initial kind of swag of what's going on in the back churn of AI. But I think when we're looking long term and what's going to happen in the industry, I do not believe that that is going to be the case. I think we are absolutely going to need junior people, but I think the nature in which we have junior people is going to shift dramatically. Let me give you an example. If you're looking at like structural engineers, right? If you're an engineer, mechanical engineer, a structural engineer, nuclear engineer, whatever it is you're doing, you have to get a certain level of training and testing before you can even get to the point where you're allowed to do any engineering whatsoever. So a lot of these people will go to school for like 4, 6, or 8 years. Then they take a test and then they get their engineer in training or their EIT. then they work underneath somebody, and then they take another test and they get their PE, their principal engineer. And then that means they can do full engineering and sign off on things. Unfortunately, I believe that that's where we're headed. And I know that that's really, really hard for a number of you. And I'm trying to come up with a different path and a different approach. And we're trying to do free training and get as many people as we can in this industry. But I think that that's where we're headed. I think that what is basic skills is going to be a huge bucket of solid technology understanding before you're allowed to even get a SOC job. I'm sorry. I just think that that's where we're headed. Now, we can try to fight the future. I'm all for that. But until then, just understand that that's where I think junior stuff is going to go. Now, what that fuels and why that's the case is context matters, right? If you're someone and you're like, I'm a real hard learner and I'll work real hard, I've got 500 resumes that say the exact same thing. How are we going to cut and work through this in such a way that we can cut through the noise to make sure that this isn't just somebody saying that they're a hard worker, but we can actually validate that they do have those skills? Now, my belief is we can move into cyber ranges like Skillbit. We can move into cyber ranges like Meta CTF, Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, things like that. I believe that that should be a good indicator of someone's overall skill set, but we need to find a way to make sure that people don't cheat in those particular situations, because I want to make sure that people have the basic skills. I want to make sure that people understand what is the basics and fundamentals of navigating a Windows system, a Linux system, and networking, so that when they're interacting with AI, two magical things happen. The first thing that happens is they can make AI work for them. That is absolutely critical. It should not be something where AI is doing their job, but make AI actually work for them. The second thing that happens is they're more cost effective. Tokens cost money, and AI is going to be incredibly expensive in the very near future. Right now, it's dirt cheap, but it's heavily subsidized by investment funding, and all of that crap is going to go away here shortly. So we are going to run into a situation where there's going to be a lot of emphasis on what you do to keep the cost of using tokens and AI usage lower in your environment. Now, if we're looking at AI also, we can have arguments, and I believe that they are valid arguments about whether or not AI has a place in the role of humanity moving forward. I think that that's a valid conversation to have over a beer, root beer or otherwise, and with no context, or sorry, with no consequences. If we're realists and we live in the real world, it is happening, especially in the world of computer security. It is absolutely 100% happening. It is not something that we're going to be able to fight completely and shut down. It is going to happen, but it does require a system. Now, a big shout out to Fan Rousseau and his class as kind of a follow on to this section. One of the things I'd recommend you look at is look at some of his workshops that we have. I think that that's absolutely critical that you understand that he has a great 4-hour workshop on these topics that I strongly encourage you to look at. We also did a webcast, I think this week, with Bull Bullock, where he was talking about harness engineering as well. So, oh, by the way, this particular image, I put this into ChatGPT and I said, hey, ChatGPT, I need a picture of Fred Astaire and the Terminator dancing together. I need Fred Astaire to say, I love AI, and I need the Terminator to say, I love humans. Can you create that for me? And it did a pretty good job, except for the fact that Fred Astaire has 3 arms. And I went back to ChatGPT and I said, hey, ChatGPT, Fred Astaire has 3 arms. And it said, oh, classic AI mistake. Do you want me to try and fix this? I can redo it. And I said, no, before you do, I would very much like to know what was your reasoning for doing this? Like, why did you set that up? It's kind of weird. I'm clicking on something. And it said, oh, excellent question. Excellent question. It was set up this way because Fred Astaire needs 2 arms to dance with the Terminator, and it needs 1 extra arm to keep the beat. Do you want me to change it? And I said, no, it's perfect just the way it is, ChatGPT. Keep it that way. All right, let's keep moving. So when we're working with AI and we're using AI, if you want to understand like how your role in AI is going to change and what you're going to do with AI, I think you need to understand that what we need to be doing is harness engineering. I did a little preview at the beginning of the class where I was talking about N8N. and was talking about how we can use a tool like N8N to create these things called workflows. So let's go over here. Let me get logged into N8N and show you how a workflow works. And really, when you're looking at N8N, you can see how AI is part of the system. It is not the entirety of the system. And that is something that a lot of people miss constantly whenever they're trying to utilize AI, is they think that AI is just something that you communicate with. You have it do coding, you use Cursor, you set up all of these different things, and go. Oh. And then magically AI is going to work on that. Uh-oh, I might have a problem here. Did I mistype it? Okay, never mind. Good thing we have a lab on this, but what I showed you yesterday is the same thing, and I do not know why. Okay, let me try one more. Nope, not going to log in today. All right, so we'll just go through that. So we have a full lab on this. You'll be able to do it, but you just showing what I showed you yesterday. All right, so we need to look at how AI fits into that overall workflow. Because if I showed you that workflow yesterday, you saw how that workflow involved multiple different nodes, and only one of those nodes was offshooting it into OpenAI and ChatGPT. Just one. That was it. We were harvesting and pulling in a whole bunch of data using a variety of different tools and a variety of other techniques that didn't have anything to do with AI. And once we got to an analysis portion, that was when we pulled it and said, okay, AI, look at this. So that is that harness engineering. Now, oops, there we go. So if we're looking at that, we can do API development and get a little stuck on LLMs and neural networks. Want to talk about that. When you're looking at AI, you need to understand that there's a massive amount of work that has been done since the 60s and 50s about AI. A lot of the mathematical models that we are using have been pretty much solidified since the 70s. The issue is, I think it was 2017, all you need is attention. Paper by some research scientists at Google, where they said, hey, we can use neural networks. If we throw enough CPUs at it, we can use neural networks with enough CPUs and enough memory to make neural networks effective at doing human-like things. And that really caused an explosion in the industry. Now, there's a lot of other models that exist that are machine learning models that have nothing to do with neural networks. The reason why I bring this up is because the more you can understand additional models to AI that are not neural networks and large language models, the more effective you're going to be. Even utilizing statistical analysis makes you far more effective. So the workflow should be, you're going to use the other models that are better at certain things. You're going to use statistical analysis, whatever, and then you're going to pull that and then have the LLM do its analysis. Don't have LLMs do analysis and do things they're not good at. It's very expensive. It will do the job, but it'll be computationally expensive to actually do. So once again, math still really, really important to know at this point. So if we're looking at N8N, right, we can automate alert enrichment, right? We can pull data from Zeek, Suricata, Elastic, Splunk, Shodan, all of these different places. And then what happens is you can pull all that data down, you can correlate and fuse that data across those multitude of sources. So this used to be something that would take analysts forever to do. You would get an alert in Splunk. You would then go and look it up and see if there was any other alerts in Suricata, any additional data in Zeek. You would get an external IP address that appeared to be sketchy. You would go Shodan and do analysis there. With N8N, you can pull all of that together. You can generate a trigger that'll cause it to pull that data all into one place. And you don't need AI to do it, right? So let's say I get an alert from Splunk. We'll just stick with, no, let's do Elastic, right? If I get an alert from Elastic, Elastic says this endpoint is exhibiting strange behavior. You can then have that trigger a workflow in N8N to go and pull the logs from Zeek for network traffic. You can have it go and pull additional enriching information from other sources like Splunk. You can have it pull the data from Shodan, pull it all into one place, then give that to AI and let AI do the analysis. That's just one way you can do it. You can also use an MCP server, and we'll talk more about model context protocol servers here in just a second. But it pulls all that data together and then does that analysis. So we can automate those threat hunting workflows across multiple different things. So like I said, if you're looking at using AI for everything, you're going to be ineffective at using AI. It's going to be expensive for you to use AI. So what you want to do is find out how you can pull as much as you can before you hand it to AI for its analysis as well. So you need to be thinking in terms of workflows. As I mentioned, what is AI actually good at, right? It is really, really good at correlating, fusing, and reasoning from data sets. It is not really good at doing complex mathematical functions. This sounds strange, but just stick with me. There's a test that I learned for visual AI models saying, generate a picture of a 20-sided dice. That's all you ask it to do. There's actually a pattern to 20-sided dice. The numbers opposite of each other will always equal 21. So on the opposite side of 1 is 20, on the opposite side of 10 is 11, and so on. That's the same thing as 6-sided dice. You're going to always equal 7, 6 to 1, and so on, right? So it's always going to equal 20 sides, 21 on the two sides opposite of each other. If you have AI do it, a lot of times AI gets lazy and it just generates the dice without putting in the math behind how that dice is rendered. So again, I know that that sounds weird, but AI is really good at generating a visual picture of dice. It's not as good as thinking through the actual mathematics of what's going on with that dice, right? So if you can do the basic analytics, if you can do the basic statistics, other AI models and mathematics like k-means clustering or MADMOM, median average distribution of the mean, you can give it something else, then give that output to AI, it rocks it, right? But don't have it do really heavy connections and pulling data if you don't have to have it do that, okay? So when we're doing this, we can also have it do a feedback loop for further refinement of that data. So once again, rather than thinking in terms of good and bad, think in terms of cost. How many steps does AI have to go through to try to reason what it is actually doing on that as well? Now, you could have an agent run Nmap, or you could have it coded and then, or sorry, you could have agent run Nmap executed on an MCP server, or you could have it code and build its own port scanner from scratch. Which of those two is cheaper? It's cheaper just to give it a freaking server, let it log in and let it do its thing, than it is to have it try to build its own way to do a port scan, right? All right, let's keep going. All right, so speaking of Nmap, what are the core network threat hunting tools that you use to parse data quickly and effectively, right? Zeek is another tool we're going to talk about. I think tomorrow we're going to spend more time talking about it. Rita, same thing. We'll be talking about Rita and doing network analysis. Those are tools that do a lot of heavy lifting, and they do it very quickly, and they are incredibly efficient at what they do. Don't have AI do that again. It's unnecessary. I'll give you another example. Still, they have AI do things like code a compiler for C. If you have AI generate a compiler for C, it's like barely as efficient as one that's been generated by the GNU C compiler that's been around for years that humans have been refining. It's good at coding, but certain things it's not as good as it is at other things. So don't have it do stupid things, right? Just basically don't let it do overkill. So we take these different tools and we can take the output and feed it into AI. But the other thing that we can do is we can use an MCP server, right? So when we're dealing with MCP servers, it is a layer that gives an agent access to a wide variety of different tools. So you can create an agent, or you can do a hunter, you can do SIM, EDR, threat intel, asset inventory, CMDB, or what you can do is give an agent access to an MCP layer. And that MCP layer has access to Splunk, Sentinel, CrowdStrike, ServiceNow, Jira, VirusTotal, Zeek, SecurityOnion, Neo4j, any of the different tools. This allows the agent to learn what it has access to, and it can interact with those tools like a human will. This does require some level of training. It does in a lot of situations, training and inference for these agents. But once they learn what these tools are and how to use those tools, they become more efficient at executing those tools. So a lot of people, when they're coding, just as a weird example, when they're coding, they'll actually give the agent access to their workstation. So if they're using like Codex or something, if they need it to do something on their system, they will give it access to their system so it can run tools and do things like a human being would. So I can say, I want you to pick up all the images in this specific directory, and I want you to take those images and feed it into an AI service that generates videos based on those images. That requires access to the folder on my computer and the ability to access the command prompt to gain access to those and move it over and build the full query that you would generate AI videos on the system. So we create these layers to give AI access to tools. About that in security, just throwing this out there. I'm in the minority on this one. I just want you to know. I'm a big fan of alerts triggering queries in these tools and then taking the output and feeding that into AI. I just am. I think that's my personal way of doing this. And once again, I am definitely the minority, right? Have the data output and let AI process that data that it receives. And the reason why I say that is it's not hard to have automatically generated queries into Splunk based on alerts. It's not hard to have generated queries into Sentinel, CrowdStrike, or whatever, to have these APIs read only, pull that data, and then do the analysis on that data. And I think Jesse just nailed it. Keep humans in the loop, right? And one of the reasons why I feel very uncomfortable is I want you to think about Splunk, Sentinel, CrowdStrike, ServiceNow, Jira, VirusTotal. AI screws up, goes rogue, something weird happens. It's got the keys to the kingdom. It has a tremendous amount of control and ability to do a tremendous amount of damage. And I know I'm in the minority. I know I'm wrong. I know that we're going to end up in a situation where AI is hooking into everything and doing everything, but it still makes me very uncomfortable. Just keeping that out there. So MCP server benefits, though, it does cut the cost of an agent or chatbot doing everything. It does. You can actually give it access to the tools and let it run those tools and pull that data back. Cuts the amount of time an analyst has to manually do things by change management, EDR, and tickets. Reduces vendor lock-in. This is beautiful. If you code your framework and your harnesses correctly, when you have an agent that goes to an MCP layer, if you want to swap out CrowdStrike for Lima Charlie, then all you really need to do is just change that section of code. See, you're taking each of these different things and it's an abstraction layer, and you don't have to rewrite your entire stack from scratch. If I want to change Splunk to Elastic, I can. If I want to change Sentinel to, I don't know what else we would do. Let's say, oh gosh, what's the name of that tool? There's a big one. I can't remember. You want to switch out any of these different tools? You can. You absolutely can. And when you're coding your harnesses and you're working with MCP servers, you need to look at everything in terms of, can I swap that specific option out for something else? This becomes incredibly important when we're talking about actual LLM models. So at BHIS, when we're developing our harnesses, if we're running with something like, let's say, Anthropic, and I start getting into refusal situations where Anthropic refuses to analyze a piece of malware because maybe it has some PHI data or PII data, maybe it has some really naughty words in it that the AI agent in OpenAI or Anthropic has said, oh, don't touch anything like that. I need to have the ability to swap out those models under the hood as needed. And that's the way we've been building everything at BHIS. So you see people all the time talking about OpenAI is better and Anthropic is better. They're getting into fights, tastes great, less filling, going back and forth. It really shouldn't matter. You should be able to swap out those models as needed. Further, the other thing that we're working at BHIS is building our own data environment where I don't need to run things in Bedrock, and I do not need to run things in OpenAI, and I do not need to run things in Anthropic. Now, for the record, this is super expensive. It is. But the reason why is if I get refusals in OpenAI and refusal in Anthropic, I cannot have my pen test practice be dead. I cannot have my SOC practice be dead. I need to have the ability to possibly go to Hugging Face and pull an open weight obliterated model and have it continue working for the things that we need to do to keep our entire environment running. So it's important to understand we need to be able to swap those components out as well. Context engineering. So if we're looking at a system, an account is logging into thousands of different systems, it's generating an alert on the network. Should we panic at this point? And context matters, right? So when you're training AI, you need to train AI to not panic all the time. You also want to make sure that AI is not too permissive of what's happening in the environment. So you have a lot of inference and you have a lot of training in these models so that they can understand what is normal and what is abnormal. This is one of the things that SOC analysts do at BHIS, is if the model is wrong, how do we tweak the model? If the signature is wrong, how do we tweak the signature? And this leads into something called risk-based alerting. So if I have a system that's just running, who am I? Over and over and over again, I'm kind of interested in that and I want to investigate it. If I have a system that's running who am I and ID and a lot of other commands, now I'm getting really interested. If I have all of those things happening, plus outbound network connections to other systems, it's now time to panic. This is important because we're no longer looking at single event logs and making a determination that evil is occurring. What we're doing is we're looking at the context of the event logs, other alerts, and other data sources in unison with each other to make a determination as to whether or not something is evil. This is something that we will be doing over the next 5 years and constantly training AI on. Further, this is just a little bit of kind of where things are going. I have a debate with Dave Kennedy coming up at Wild West Hacking Fest. Not super excited about that. Kind of got roped into it by, I don't know, all of you, the people in our community on our Discord server. But my argument is offensive AI is going to be outpacing defensive AI for the near future. And Dave is saying defensive AI can beat offensive AI. One of the reasons why I believe my approach, and I really want Dave to be right in this particular one, I do. But one of the reasons why I believe I'm right is complexity is the enemy of computer security, and AI can only defend what it sees. If we have a lot of SaaS services and custom applications that are being built and AI doesn't have visibility into it, well, then how is it going to actually defend us in those particular situations? So this is my reasoning, right? And this is one of the reasons why I believe that junior analysts and SOC jobs are going to continue to exist for humans, because there's so much that's being created in the world of IT right now. People are taking SaaS apps they pay hundreds of dollars for, and they're literally recreating them in a matter of hours. My SOC, there's a cloud-based SaaS product that they charge a lot of money for cloud-based security. We rebuilt the entire thing with more features in a matter of a week than what this vendor does. And this is a problem, by the way, that every vendor out there has to deal with. It's a problem for us in computer security because it's vibe coded. There's going to be a lot of vibe coded code out there, and it's going to be our job to secure that vibe coded code. So my point is there's a lot of work that needs to be done moving forward. So here's an example hunting skill. If we get a beacon, is this beacon unique? And this is all AC Hunter stuff that we're building. By the way, I like the look of this particular comic book character for some reason. I don't know. Is this beacon unique? When did we first see the DNS entry? How risky is the ASN? How is the internal endpoint a server, IoT system? Is it a workstation? Is the external endpoint risky? Showdown analysis. See, we can take that beacon and we can extrapolate from that beacon more data utilizing AI and tying things together than we ever had before. That's an example of how AI can help us bring that data to a human being so we can make a determination on it as well. Which brings us to the lab of the day. I just shared it with you all. Let me go back here, pull it down. It's in resources. It is I got to go to resources. I'm in the wrong chat. Here we go. Copy that link. All right. And I'm going to put it here. As I said, this is a completely different VM environment, right? We're using this one, right? So let me reconnect. There we go. Right. And for this one, you're actually going to be using the Linux VM right here. So you're going to connect via RDP to the Linux VM, and it says that right here in the instructions as well. So let me go ahead and close this one, close this one. There we go. So you're going to connect to the Linux VM, which I'm just connecting to right now. But that's the one on the left here. It's the Linux Ubuntu VM, right? So you're going to connect into the Linux Ubuntu VM, and you're going to open a terminal, and we're going to walk through the steps of actually installing N8N. Now, for the record, this is a fully functional version of N8N, but it does not have the AI hotness that I showed you yesterday, where I just gave it natural language, what I wanted, and AI built it. For that, you have to pay money. You do. I'm sorry. You just do. So what we're doing here, though, is we're having you create a workflow, creating it node by node so that you understand how N8N works, so that when you create your workflows using AI, you have that ability to do that as well. For the record, you don't need the full commercial version to generate those workflows. Let me show you how we would do that here. So we can do that here in OpenAI. So what I would do is, let me do this. Just give me a second. So N8N does the exact same thing that I'm about to do with their AI. You can do this for free. So watch. I want to create an N8N workflow that can be easily imported into any N8N instance. The way the workflow is going to work is it's going to receive a file that will be uploaded as part of the first node in the workflow by the user that'll list a bunch of IP addresses. It'll then take those IP addresses, submit them to Shodan, and then it'll pull the data back from each one of those IP addresses from Shodan in a JSON format. And then it will import that into ChatGPT for analysis on the results of the Shodan output. Then it'll take that output and kick it out to an HTML report. All right. So now, oops, I take that, I'm transcribing it, and then I feed that into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will actually generate that workflow. So it's going to ask me a few questions about it. And let me see here what questions it asked me. Okay. That all looks good. I want the final output to be an HTML report. There we go. All right, now it's going to create the JSON. And then what you would do is you could take this from the output that I have, you can download it, and then you can just import it into an N8N instance. It's not going to be as good as the N8N ones that it's created, because it seems like N8N does know what it's doing. And I also kind of slapped this together a little bit. Okay, there we go. So we can do it that way, right? But for right now, I want you to learn how to install N8N, and I want you to understand workflow and how to build those nodes manually. So we're going to create a Docker instance. We're going to pull down N8N inside of the Docker. There we go. We're removing one of the Docker images, and then we're adding in this one. And this breaks down the actual commands of generating the N8N instance. Then you're going to log into N8N, customize it a little bit for you. We give you the instructions on how it's supposed to be set up. And then we're going to create our first trigger. In this particular situation, we're just creating a simple HTTP request node for webhooks, and we're going to generate this from the command line. So you'll have something that'll generate something from the command line, feed data to N8N, and then trigger the workflow. This is a great way to create a way that's really useful for a wide variety of third-party tools that generate logs on a local system to be able to trigger workflow on remote N8N systems. So we get a HTTP request. So this is what the method is, a get, and then the URL is this. And we're giving you the instructions on how to put that together step by step by step and where the data goes. And then you can trigger it. What's cool is you can trigger the workflow and make sure that it actually works at each step. Then we're going to build a security alert workflow associated with this as well. We're adding in another step. We're going to listen for an event. We got that post method that comes in. We're going to create the webhook associated for it. And then you're going to send a test using curl to trigger that specific webhook. So this is all fake data, but we can see right here, it's like the alert is, brute force, the source IP address, SSH, severity is high, all of those different things. But there is a random string of gobbledygook right here. You can see this 1B4F0847. That is kind of like an API key for the webhook. So you need to replace that section right here with the one that was generated up above by N8N. So then it automatically will communicate. Then you'll trigger that and you can see what that looks like on N8N when it receives that data as well. Then we can create a severity node where we can create an if, where it basically can do an if then else statement. And if it's at a certain level of severity, then it'll actually trigger another workflow to generate the actual alert, right? And you'll see that node output show up here. And then you can set up a respond webhook node to let you know that it's been received properly. And then you can test out the full workflow of it at the end. So a lot of steps with this, right? But this gives you an idea how nodes are created and how you can actually edit the nodes. Now, if you're feeling spunky at this particular point, you can click part 2, which incorporates using AI integration. So how do you take that workflow and actually kick off that request node and send that into OpenAI using an OpenAI key to basically submit the results in and then pull that data back, okay? All right, so that is the lab. This is going to take us through the rest of class, and tomorrow morning I'll do the walkthrough. Unfortunately, there will not be an Ask Me Anything today. I am really sorry about that because I have a doctor's appointment. I don't know if it's like this for you, but boy, trying to get a doctor's appointment these days is hard, and they tend to set up very, very specific timeframes that you need to show up and be available. So I'm going to kill all of my labs right now so we don't have to work for it. So I've got to get going to get that doctor's appointment, but you guys work on this lab, and then tomorrow I'll do the walkthrough for everybody. All right, everybody, get out of here. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning, but get the lab done.